in your questions. Do send it. We've
indeed.
got, for anybody watching, we've got a little plate full of questions here that we might get to when we run out of interesting things to say and interesting things to talk about.
Which is rare.
Yeah, that is. Well, Niamh, what are we going to talk about today?
Today we're going to talk about chastity.
Chastity, yes. Being
Interesting.
chaste and what chastity means. Yeah, it's an important one, isn't it? Why is it important?
Well, I think more and more, obviously, it's important for the culture which we live in, and I think there's different ideas and different interpretations of what chastity means and what it is, and it can be confusing. But I think it's important to just go back to the root of chastity as a virtue.
Yeah. I mean, I think we're all very familiar with a certain kind of secular culture in which the idea of chastity as a virtue is shunned. And so, I mean, we're familiar with the hookup culture, you know, very, very much prevalent, you know, in a lot of social media and popular media. But also there's been a kind of reactionary swing against that, not just within religious circles, but even within secular circles. You know, we're seeing the rise of people, you know, really popular podcasters like Joe Rogan, Jocko Willink, Jordan Peterson, advocate for this very extreme form of chastity and self-ownership, which is a reaction against that, you know, sort of hookup culture, which is very familiar. But the thing is about chastity, that reactionary sort of swing away from the hookup culture is also a form of being unchaste. It's actually a lack of chastity, and you know that's going to be something that, you know, it's going to be interesting to get into, because chastity as a virtue regulates well, technically, and we'll get into it, it regulates you know, our desire for the pleasures of touch. And if you can't, it's like with food, if you can't enjoy food, or if you can't, you know, engage with the pleasures of touch in a rational sort of manner, you're actually being unchaste as well. So that's kind of what we're going to look at. Isn't it going to be fun? Yeah,
it's really interesting. Like, denying it is maybe not just as bad, but in denying it is also a problem.
Well, I mean, we are going to get into the weeds of it, but to deny sort of the reality of the pleasures of touch and, you know, the virtuous use thereof and the rational use thereof is to be inhuman in a way. If you can't enjoy, you know, these things, well, you're not being fully human. And that's maybe a problem with the reactionary swing against the hookup culture, that both types of culture, both extremes, are less than fully human. They're less than, you know, fully virtuous. Virtue lies in the middle, in the between, at the intersection. Isn't that right?
Indeed.
So, how are we going to get into this?
Well, let's start explaining first by what a virtue is.
What a virtue is. So, would you like me to do that?
Yes.
Okay, I'll do that. So, gentle listeners, virtue. Virtue, it's a translation of a Greek term which means excellence. So virtue is a kind of excellence, and virtue is just Latin. Virtus means power or ability or capability. And the virtues are ways of behaving, ways of acting in the world by which we can be fully human, by which we can achieve the ends of our human nature. These are the natural virtues. There's what's called natural virtues, and there's theological virtues which build upon and perfect the natural virtues. Now, Niamh, let's see if you can remember your Aristotle here. Okay?
Yeah.
So, Niamh's a philosophy student, soon to be a graduate of philosophy. We must congratulate Niamh on this.
Thank you.
Her undergraduate days are coming over. She's about to enter postgraduate work, and you know, she and all the gentle students have done so well, and they've got this far. So they all deserve high praise for getting this far. Yeah. So if you're like me, Niamh, you'll be a student the rest of your life.
I think so.
So, Aristotle, Nicomachean Ethics. How many cardinal virtues are there?
3. 4.
4 cardinal virtues.
There's 4.
Niamh, gentle listeners, for those of you who aren't, you know, sort of watching live, just listening, Niamh just gave me such a dirty look there. So, there's 4 cardinal virtues. Can you name them? Can you remember them?
Prudence.
Prudence.
Justice.
Justice. Dead air. Silence. Fortitude.
Fortitude.
Courage. And Chastity is a
Yeah.
species of this last one.
Um,
Oh, this isn't fair. You've just finished your exam. Temperance.
temperance.
Gentle listeners,
2 out of 4 is not bad.
well, there are 4 cardinal virtues.
Yeah.
These are the hinge, the cardinal virtues on which everything depends. All virtues are species of these cardinal virtues. So we have prudence, justice, fortitude, and temperance. Now, can you drive a car, Niamh?
No.
Oh, can you ride a bike?
Yes,
Can you read and write English?
indeed.
Right. This is brilliant. So, gentle listeners, for those of you who can drive a car, ride a bike, read and write English, these are habits that we have. Now, they're habits and skills that we have that we had to learn at some point, and when we learned them, it was awkward. Niamh, when you learn to drive a car, you're going to find it awkward, okay? Because you have to lift up the clutch and push down the accelerator as you let to get the car going. You also have to take the brake off as well. Yeah. So it's so awkward and so annoying, but for people who've been driving like me for, however long, 22, 23 years, it's second nature. And that's what a virtue is. Aristotle actually coined that term, second nature. We have our nature, our biological nature, and then we have our second nature, which are our habitual ways of acting. And virtues are like this. There are certain capacities that we humans have, and we're going to go through them. And we have to develop these virtues to control these capacities so that we can live in a fully human, in an excellent sort of way, so that we can flourish and gain what Aristotle called eudaimonia, which we've talked about a few times. Is this all ringing a bell?
Indeed.
Again, Aristotle's coming back to you. He was a smart guy, wasn't he?
Yeah, indeed.
So, why 4 cardinal virtues? Oh, Gavin, don't ask me this. That was that look, wasn't
Why
it?
4?
Why 4? Yeah. Do you know why?
No.
Okay. There are 4 features of human nature which are essential to human nature. Okay. So we're composites of body and soul. So the rational soul is the form of our body. Okay. It's not a separate mind. It's not a separate thing. It's not a ghost in a machine or anything like that. It is the form of our body.
Yeah.
So as animals that are rational, we have 2 intellectual sort of operations, and we have 2 sort of passions or faculties that we're subject to as rational animals. And we need to be virtuous in all these ways. Virtue needs to govern all of these. So can you recall our 2 intellectual activities?
Today's not my day.
I'm sorry, Niamh. We actually maybe should have, rehearsed this.
Maybe we should have talked about this.
Yeah. The first intellectual activity that we have is understanding, intelligence, when we understand things.
Okay.
You ever had that experience, Niamh, when you read something and you actually
Not
understand?
often, but yeah.
Yeah, that happens. Yeah. So we have an active understanding where we understand something. Let's say, we know something about water. We know that it's H2O, right? But then after that, once we know something, we can desire something, we can will it, we can choose it, chase after it. So you know that water's H2O, but when you're just out of the gym and you're really thirsty, you're like, oh, I'm going to have a drink of water or a coffee when the caffeine levels get dangerously low. All right? You're like, oh, I'm going to have some of that. So it's not just, I know that to be coffee. It's like, I want that coffee, and that's the will.
Yeah.
Okay? Now, we need virtues which govern both the intelligence, so that we're intelligent in a virtuous way, and which govern the will. The virtue which governs intelligence is prudence. Prudence is what governs our intelligence. It's a practical wisdom whereby we know the right thing to do when we're doing it. So, you know how to walk, don't you? Yeah. Somebody who's driving, somebody who's walking, you've done it so much and so long that, if an obstacle is in your way, you're able to circumnavigate it. That's prudence. That's practical wisdom. It's a very basic example of it, but that's what it is. Justice is the virtue which governs the will. Okay, it's seated in the will, because when we are willing things, we have to do so in a just manner. And justice literally means giving somebody what they deserve, giving them their due. So that's the first 2 cardinal virtues. Are you with me so far?
Yes.
Okay, I just saw you take a big swig of coffee there.
Yeah.
Okay. Right, what about fortitude and temperance? Where do they reside? You tell me while I have my swig of coffee.
Fortitude and temperance.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in the acts and how we act, temperance.
Okay.
How we act.
Okay.
Fortitude.
I like the way you trail off there when you're not too sure of the answer. It's wonderful. So many people do it when you ask them a question and they try to get that. It's kind of in the way that way. And then it's the bit of the mumble there. Fortitude and temperance, gentle listeners. Niamh, you've heard of passions,
Yeah.
haven't you? So people who are passionate, it doesn't mean what you think it means. To have a passion is to suffer, to undergo. Think of the passion of Christ.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's something that you suffer. We suffer passions, and as animals, we need to suffer passions. Have you ever got hungry?
Yeah.
And in being hungry, have you ever been hangry?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Have you ever gone without coffee?
Yes.
And then the passion just kicks in. Yeah. Well, as animals, we need those to survive. We need our passion. We couldn't live in the world just as embodied intellects. We need our bodies. And so we undergo these passions, and there are two particular kinds of passions. There are what are called, wait for it, there are what are called irascible passions. Can you tell me about irascible passions? Think of ira, think of anger.
They're bad ones.
No.
Good ones. They're going to take me off air.
Yeah, there's just going to be a wee walking stick just comes and just pulls Niamh. That's why she's on the chair with wheels. Irascible passions are, do you know the sort of the get up and go? You know, like,
Motivation.
Yeah, I'm just going to kill it. I'm going to overcome this obstacle. I'm going to, open up my essay document and I'm going to get my dissertation done. You know, that sort of feeling?
Yeah.
Irascible passions are those sorts of passions that we have as animals which sort of pushes us to overcome an obstacle. That's what an irascible passion is. So what do you think, when we think of overcoming obstacles, facing up to something, what virtue do you think, would
Fortitude.
go? Yeah, courage, fortitude. Fortitude is the virtue which makes reasonable use of our irascible passions. Because let's say, I just have this get up and go and I'm going to overcome something, I'm going to get my dissertation done. And let's say I just decide I'm going to go 24 hours straight through and live on nothing but cans of Munster and cigarettes. That's not a very good, way of using that passion. Now, I have no doubt that there are many students.
It might be a reality for many right now, myself included.
But fortitude is actually the virtue which, makes rational use of that passion. That yes, we need this passion, and we're going to do it, and we're going to get through it, and we're going to overcome, getting this dissertation done, because it's scary going back to a piece of work that you've been looking at and maybe ignoring for months. I have a publication that I have to have ready for the 1st of June. And I have been ignoring it for about a year and a half. And now that the 1st of June's coming up. And it requires courage. God, I'm going to open this document.
Have to open the document, yeah.
And you see what you've written a few weeks back and you're like, did I actually write that?
Yeah.
So, fortitude is the virtue which allows us to overcome obstacles, the irascible passions. But now we have other passions. So we're not just motivated to overcome things. We also have other passions where we want to enjoy things. You ever felt that before, where you just want to lie back and do nothing? Just, it's called a Sunday afternoon. You just want to drink warm beer, eat crisps, and watch TV.
Warm beer.
Yeah. Well, there are these passions, and these are called concupiscible passions. There's a word, concupiscible. Concupiscible. The indefatigable Niamh. So there are these passions called concupiscible passions, where we just want to sit back and enjoy. And really, these passions are about the pleasures of touch. So food, drink, and sex. That's what these pleasures are about, the pleasures of touch. All of them involve touch in some way. And they're pleasures of touch because they bring whatever faculty it is, let's say, hunger or digestive faculty, they bring it to its natural completion. So a lot of people are very satisfied when they eat. It is a satisfying, sort of thing to do, to feed yourself.
Yeah.
And Aristotle talks about, gaining pleasure is when a faculty is brought to its natural completion. The same for drink, the same for sex. It's satisfying, these pleasures of touch. But we can make irrational use of these passions. Have you ever sort of overindulged in ice cream and pizza and beer? And
Just as early as yesterday.
As early as yesterday. Yeah, when we're on our way back after the radio show and we have our
We
8
usually
donuts.
indulge in a few donuts.
In our 8 donuts. Well, I can't at the minute. I'm in training, but
Yeah.
so you're going to have to eat all my donuts, Niamh.
Fair.
So, what do you think is the virtue which governs the concupiscible passions?
Temperance.
Temperance. And think about that. Temperance. We temper that passion. We stop ourselves from eating the entire tub of ice cream, or drinking too much because we know that's going to be bad for us. So, but we make reasonable use of it. But now here's the thing: these pleasures of touch. It's intemperate to make an overuse of them. It's also intemperate not to use them, not to indulge them. Imagine somebody who never eats. Imagine somebody who just really just abstains from all food and they hate food, and we think well, this is an unhealthy attitude to have. And technically speaking, I mean, somebody like Aristotle will say, well, that's irrational to do that. This is a natural faculty that we have, and it requires fulfilling. So somebody is intemperate when they don't make use of it. So when we say virtue is in the middle, it's the middle between an excess and a deficiency. We can overindulge some sort of passion, or we can underindulge it, and virtue is found in the middle. And when we come back to talk about chastity, that's where we're going to be. We're going to see how we can be unchaste, how the hookup culture can be unchaste, but also that reactionary culture, that swing away from that hookup culture, can also be unchaste as well. And there's a somewhat common denominator underlying the two sort of extremes that hopefully we're going to explore and get chatting about. So, gentle listeners, that's the end of our first segment. Thank you for tuning in. If you want to get in touch with us, text or WhatsApp, it's 089 467 2000. That's 089 467 2000. And if you're calling from outside of Ireland, that's plus 353 89467 2000. Plus 353 89467 2000. So go off, have a cup of tea, have a coffee.
Have a wee think about it. Any questions?
Have a wee think, and any questions, and send them in. Niamh's going to do all the talking in the next session. She's going to tell us all about
Let's take your notebook there.
And the ethics. Exactly. So go off, have a cup of tea, and listen to this music, and we'll be back in a few minutes.
On a plane the other day, just wishing that I could get out, when the man next to me saw the book in my hand and asked me what it was about. So I settled back in my seat, a bestseller, I said, a history and mystery in one. Then I opened up the book and began to read from Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
And the Word was with God, and the Word
He was born of a virgin one holy night in the little town of Bethlehem. Angels gathered round him underneath the stars, singing praises to the great I am. He walked on the water, healed the lame, and made the blind to see again. And for the first time here on earth, we learned that God could be a friend. And though he never ever did a single thing wrong, the angry crowd chose him. And then he walked down the road and died on the cross, and that was the end of the beginning. That's a Bible, he said, and I've heard it all before. I've tried religion, it's shame and guilt, and I don't need it anymore. It's superstition, made-up tales, just to help the weak to survive. Oh, let me read it again, I said, listen closely, this is gonna change your life. He was born of a virgin one holy night in the little town of Bethlehem. Angels gathered round him underneath the stars, singing praises to the great I am. He walked on the water, healed the lame, and made the blind to see again. And for the first time here on earth, we learned that God could be a friend. And though he never ever did a single thing wrong, the angry crowd chose him. And then he walked down the road and died on the cross, and that From the beginning, he said with a smile, what more could there be? He's dead. You said they hung him and put nails in his hands and a crown of thorns on his head. I said I'll read it again, but this time there's more. And I believe that this is true. His death wasn't the end, but the beginning of life that's completed in you. Don't you see? He did all this for you. He was born of a virgin one holy night in the little town of Bethlehem. All the angels singing, praises to the great I am. He walked on the water, healed the lame, and made the blind to see. Did you know that God could be a friend? And though he never did a single thing wrong, he was the one the crowd chose. And then he walked and he died. But 3 days later, 3 days later, he He came and he lived and he died, but that was the end of the beginning.
Welcome back, gentle listeners. I hope you enjoyed that music. That was Neve's choice. She chose the song.
It's one of my favourites.
So, Neve, we're back and we're getting into chastity. We're going to talk about chastity now. So we've talked about the cardinal virtues, or I've talked about the cardinal virtues. I feel, Neve, that you need to sort of, take the wheel here.
Gavin was giving me, what's the word? Guff during the break.
Was I?
Yeah.
Right. Neve needs to talk a wee bit more to me. So I need a wee bit more energy out of Neve. She's had her coffee now, so
Yeah, I'm
she's
ready.
into it. So let's talk about chastity. What is chastity?
Chastity is the virtue.
Yeah, it is a virtue. Yeah.
I mean, I obviously know what chastity is, but I don't know that. Like, for me, if someone's asked me what is chastity, I would say, well, it's avoiding sex until you're married, avoiding certain other things before you're married.
Right. This is brilliant. So this gets us into, the weeds of what chastity is, because I like the way that you sort of defined it as it's avoiding something until marriage, let's say. So if chastity, now we're just going to explore that thought. If chastity is avoiding X, Y, and Z until you're married, does that mean when you're married then you're not chaste?
Well, by that definition, well, yeah, technically, but of course, no.
So obviously then chastity isn't avoiding stuff. That's not what chastity is. It's not about avoiding things. Think about that. I mean, if chastity as a virtue is meant to kind of be involved with our concupiscible desires, that this desire being a desire for sex, why should the rational use of that desire mean avoiding it? I mean, Thomas Aquinas is very explicit on this. I mean, chastity is not about avoiding things. It's about using things in the right way. Our concupiscible desire for sex being one of them. Okay, so we'll try again and have a look at what chastity is. So it's brilliant that you brought that up, because that is a misconception about chastity. I mean, if husband and wife are meant to be chaste in a marriage, well, that's not really going to work out if being chaste means avoiding X, Y, and Z until you're married, because then if X, Y, and Z is happening when you're married, you're not being chaste. So Will we go at it again?
Indeed.
So we're setting that aside, gentle listeners. So we take that idea of chastity, okay, we put it in a little box and we just set it. We put it away, right? Okay, so we've cleaned the blackboard. We're going to figure out what chastity is. Think of the word chaste. Chastity. Chastise. Okay, what does to chastise something mean?
Isn't it? It's not the opposite, no? Like, to chastise someone is to kind of tell them off, or like,
Yeah. To tell somebody off, to punish them, to rein them in.
yeah,
Technically, to chastise somebody is to rein in the wildness and, put them on the straight and narrow.
yeah,
Now, so if we think of the concupiscible passions, the pleasures of touch, right, as sort of being these sort of desires which need satiated, well, they're going to need chastised in some sort of way, because, you get hungry, you get more hungry, you get more hungry if you don't feed that. Okay? So it just keeps growing and growing and growing. Well, chastity is going to be the virtue which governs our desire for sex, or as, Aquinas called the venereal act, right? And really what it just does is that it reins it in and puts it in accord with reason. Okay, it means one makes use of that, one makes rational use of that. So one basically just uses that desire in an appropriate way. We can imagine all sorts of inappropriate uses of that desire. Chastity is simply making the appropriate use of that. It's not avoiding stuff, it's just, using that in the right way. How does that sit with you? What do you think about that?
yeah. I mean, it makes sense. Like, if you're talking about other, like, you're talking about, eating, or like if you go the whole day kind of without eating anything, and then you end up like going to McDonald's or something.
Yeah.
It's obviously not a good thing to do. It would have been much better if you had kind of eaten regularly.
Yeah.
Or been exposed to like something more regularly rather than avoiding something altogether.
Yeah. Which is why, I mean, stick with the eating example, swing diets.
Yeah.
Every January, 1st of January, somebody goes on a crazy diet, maybe loses a lot of weight, and then puts it all back on. Because it's not a regimented, diet, of monitored calorie intake, macronutrient intake, and all the rest, which is much better and much healthier than just, a swing diet. Because people's weight just swings. So, to be temperate then in that way is not just to avoid this, that, and the other. It's to regulate the passion in question. Yeah, to regulate and control the passion in question, so that we, because we're rational animals, are not subject to the passion. The passion is subject to us and to our decisions and our choosings. Brilliant. Right. Will we move on?
Indeed.
Okay, let's take this a wee bit further. Now, you talked about, chastity, being this sort of avoiding stuff until you're married, let's say. There's also this sort of focus on chastity, that chastity has to be this very strict, controlled regime which sort of enforces and has to govern the relationship between men and women, especially prior to marriage, especially in courtship, which is true. I mean, prior to marriage, courtship, relationships are forming, they're getting to like each other, we need to be, chaste. Right. Perfectly reasonable. But the problem comes in whenever chastity is considered as these simple rules of avoidance. Okay. Because if chastity is a virtue, it's meant to make you a better human being. It's not just about avoiding X, Y, and Z. Yeah? So the kind of picture that we're getting here when it comes to chastity, especially, say in courtship, is that chastity is not a matter of reason in a war with our concupiscible desires. Okay, the virtuous person wants to be virtuous. If you're trying to be virtuous and you're not enjoying practicing virtue, you're not virtuous yet. Okay, if you are really rebelling against being virtuous, you're not virtuous yet. The virtuous person is happy to be virtuous. It's fulfilling to them. I'm realising that maybe some people are thinking, oh well, maybe I'm not virtuous. But that's literally what Aristotle talks about. If you're trying to practice virtue but you're not enjoying it, you've still got a way to go. It's not second nature to you yet.
What are you meant to do on that way? Because obviously, like, being virtuous in all areas, like, can be difficult. Choosing the virtuous path is difficult. And if you're finding it difficult...
Well, there's a difference between finding it difficult and enjoying what you're doing, being happy with finding it fulfilling.
Yeah, so, I mean, I find writing my dissertation, which is an interesting example, difficult but fulfilling. So that's like virtue. Difficult but fulfilling. Okay.
It's like the gym. The gym is, hard. It's difficult. It's destructive. you came for one workout with me and some of the
Yeah.
other guys, and it's it's intense,
Yeah, one being the word there.
but it's fulfilling, it's satisfying. It's kind of,
Indeed.
I'm glad I did that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so virtue can be difficult,
Yeah.
but it's satisfying when you do it. But what I'm talking about is somebody who really isn't finding virtue satisfying.
Okay.
It means they're not in a virtuous state. They still have a way to go. Their character still has a way to be formed
Yeah.
to be virtuous. You happy with that?
Well, to take it back to chastity, then, like
Yeah.
if someone is struggling with chastity or is not enjoying being chaste,
Mm-hmm.
then what's the alternative to that? Like.
So, whenever somebody is trying to form virtues,
Yeah.
it's a process. It's like learning to drive a car.
Yeah.
It's awkward at first until it becomes second nature. You keep doing the activities of the virtue, and in doing the activities, your character will form in accordance with your
Yeah.
activities.
Yeah.
So it's like being courageous. In order to become courageous, you need to do courageous acts.
Yeah.
You need to do things that you're afraid of and be courageous in the face of them. And interestingly, courage isn't being without fear. Courage is doing what needs to be done even in the face of fear.
Yeah.
So to be courageous is to do courageous acts, and then your character will form in such a way that after a while you will be courageous. So somebody struggling with chastity needs to keep performing chaste acts,
Yeah.
okay? Doing what the chaste person does until one's character is formed in such a way that one just is a chaste
Yeah.
person. But the interesting thing here, and especially when it comes to courtship and relationships between men and women prior to marriage, is that if you're a virtuous person, there doesn't need to be rules and regulations
Yeah.
which govern how we relate to each other, because the virtuous person wants to be virtuous and
Yeah.
wants to be chaste anyway. So there doesn't need to be a set of rules or regulations,
Yeah.
governing courtship rituals, because when two virtuous people get together, and we talked about friendship, with Brother Chris a few weeks back. The best form of friendship is the virtuous friendship, and they're the relationships which last, the virtuous
Yeah.
relationships. So when two virtuous people get together, form a relationship and a lifelong self-giving of themselves to each other, they want to be chaste, and they want to be virtuous in that way.
I find that really interesting when you're like, because if you hear, they're talking about chastity, you automatically think we're talking about sex, but that's not. I mean, we're talking about a virtue, and I think when you're talking about chastity in that way, like two people being together in a relationship or dating, each is pursuing the good life separately, but then they want the good for the other as well, and that's the virtuous life.
Yeah.
And that's how one looks at chastity and all the other virtues, so that like all these other rules.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, because being virtuous, and I think maybe a lot of people find this disappointing when it comes to the virtues. Virtue is not a rule-based way of life. Virtue is about forming a certain character so that one lives one's life in a certain way, but not according to a set of rules. That's what virtue is. Virtue sort of forms you from within, so that you will act in a virtuous way. I get a feeling that a lot of modern and contemporary people who are interested in ethics and in moral theory, they want a rule-based ethics.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing about a rule-based ethics is that if you've got the set of rules, when you've broken the rules, and when you've acted in accord with them. But here's what happens: when you praise yourself for acting in accord with the rules, but when you break the rules, you think, well, the rules are stupid.
Yeah.
We're going to give up on the rules, and that actually swings us back, to the kind of commonality between the extreme hookup culture and the extreme reaction. Both of them think of the ethical life and ethical engagement with other people as having to be governed by rules. It's just the extreme hookup culture thinks, well, those rules are stupid.
Yeah.
I'm not going to follow these rules. I'm going to do my own thing and live my own way. Whereas the extreme reaction to it, where just complete and absolute non-indulgence of any sorts of passion whatsoever, is like, these are the cast iron rules. Any one of these is broken, and that's disaster. Spells disaster. Two extremes which share the same ideas as to what it is to live a human life, whereas the reality, virtue, is somewhere in between.
Yeah, because obviously, like, one set of rules doesn't work universally either.
Absolutely.
In not even in different cultures. I mean, with different people in different groups within the same culture. So this set of rules doesn't work either way. So then there has to be something that works, and obviously the virtuous way is something that works. I mean, this is obviously Aristotle, a pre-Christian thinker, but there's lots of other secular writers who pick up on virtue ethics and
a lot of contemporaries pick up on virtue ethics these days. A lot of Islamic philosophers, Jewish philosophers as well, all influenced by Aristotle and the Aristotelian tradition. I think the interesting takeaway here is that the virtuous person wants to be virtuous, and being chaste is not a matter of being at war with your passions. It's simply regulating your passions. It's not denying your passions, but it's regulating them and putting them to the right use in the right circumstances for the right goal. And there's all sorts of ways in which we can tease that out, but I think it's important just to emphasise that to be chaste is to use, say, your concupiscible desire for sex in a proper, reasonable manner, and it's not to deny it. And I think with these extremes, in the culture wars, maybe sometimes there's a reactionary extreme to denying, that concupiscible passion.
Yeah, and obviously, I mean, when you have that hookup culture happening so extreme, it's quite, I suppose, normal that a quick reaction comes up against it. But I think what's important too is, like, virtue, living the virtuous life is so that one can flourish. Like, living the virtuous life results in human flourishing, which kind of insinuates some sort of freedom. And if there's rules and you're not free. I mean, there's rules in which we have to live, like moral laws and rules. Yeah. But that's different. They don't inhibit our freedom. Yeah. They exuberate our freedom. So, like, taking virtue, taking chastity to be a way to human flourishing, I think is really important. Yeah.
So we're getting to the end of our second segment now.
Wow, time is flying.
Yeah, time is flying in. So, gentle listeners, we'll advise you just to have a cup of tea, a coffee.
The sun is shining, maybe get a quick bit of sun. Well, the sun is shining here.
Yeah. Well, they can take their phones outside and watch on their phones, listen on their phones. We'll just go to play some music, so go have a cup of tea, and we'll be back just after this song.
In the darkest hour, when I cannot breathe, fear is on my chest, the weight of the world on me. Everything's crashing down, everything I've known. When I wonder if I'm all alone, I remember. I can't stop thinking about your goodness, goodness. I can't stop thinking about. I can't stop thinking about. I can't stop thinking about your goodness, goodness. I can't stop thinking about. I can't stop thinking about. I can't stop thinking about your goodness, goodness. I can't stop thinking about. I can't stop thinking about. I can't stop thinking about your goodness, goodness. I remember. You have always been faithful to me. I remember. Even when my own eyes could not see, you were there, always there with me.
Welcome back, gentle listeners. We are into our final segment. Niamh has some questions she wants to ask and discuss. So it's like therapy.
So we were talking there about avoiding things and yeah. And there's obviously this idea. So we're talking about rules within courtship, and I mean, obviously different things work for different people. But I mean, that's the case in all things. You know, if you're trying to eat healthy, don't go to the deli. You know what I mean? So it just reminded me of this idea of the occasion to sin.
Oh, the occasion to sin.
Yeah, and I suppose the misunderstanding of what that means, because I mean, the words there are important. The occasion to sin.
The occasion to sin.
For me, I would hear a lot or understand like the occasion to sin is almost a sin itself.
Yeah, yeah.
But that obviously mistranslates the word occasion.
Oh, awful term. Awful term. An occasion of sin. Like, think about it, right?
Explain yourself, Dr. Kerr.
Think about it. We all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, right? Original sin. We inherit original sin, which involves a darkening of the intellect and a weakening of the will. Human life is an occasion of sin. Our entire life is an occasion of sin.
Yeah.
Because everything presents an occasion by which we can sin. There is no stage of human life that isn't an occasion of sin. So, by talking about an occasion of sin, one is speaking of something which is just devoid of meaning, because one's talking about human life. This is the disposition that we have as human beings, with the darkening of the intellect and the weakening of the will. But guess what? A little event happened a couple of thousand years ago where God became man, redeemed us all in becoming man, and gives us the grace by which we are able to overcome sin. So human life, yes, it's an occasion of sin, the whole thing, but it's been redeemed. So the idea of an occasion of sin, which is discussed, in some quarters, as being, this sort of real sort of thing that we need to avoid, is, something very problematic on the sort of account of virtue that we're discussing. Because even if we think, outside, the sort of religious context of sin and redemption and all of that, when we just think about what virtue is, we're recognizing that virtue takes time and effort, and you can make a mistake and you can mess things up, but in striving to be virtuous, you get there in the end and you form a character, so that even if you have all these sort of influences trying to draw you away from virtue, because you have a virtuous character, that doesn't matter. And when it comes to especially when it comes to chastity, there's this idea that you know the way there's alcoholism, right? That people who suffer from alcoholism, God bless them, and have maybe AA, just completely gone off alcohol, and they say to themselves, you know what, I just can't be around alcohol. I just can't do that, and that's fair enough. So they avoid alcohol. Others who, suffer from alcoholism, have given it up, but find, yes, I can be around alcohol because I'm strong enough in myself. I can be around that. Okay. But, both reactions are fine.
Yeah.
But what maybe sort of sometimes comes out in popular level talk about chastity, it's as if every human being is a sexual alcoholic. It's as if they're an alcoholic when it comes to sexual desire, that they're incapable of being virtuous, and so
Yeah.
they just ought not to be in any sort of situation whereby some sort of sexual desire can occur. But the point to remember is that concupiscible passions, concupiscence in itself, is neither good nor bad. It's the choices, the use that you make of it, which is good or bad. And maybe some of that's lost in more popular level discussion of chastity, because there always seems to be this sort of presupposition that, we're just sexual alcoholics, so we either need to, swing in one direction, fully abstain from that, or swing in the other direction. Well, this is my passion and I'm just going to indulge that.
Yeah.
That, again, that's what those two extreme camps seem to presuppose, that there's kind of this sexual alcoholism native to every one of us, and we either fully embrace it or we fully avoid it. But the truth is that that's not true.
Yeah.
We're all born into the world with different dispositions, but we have the concupiscible passions so that we can live in the world. And if we're striving to be virtuous, then we make the right use out of those passions at the right time and in the right way.
Yeah. I think it comes back to kind of misunderstanding what chastity is or means. Like, chastity is a virtue, and if you're kind of misunderstanding it just to be avoiding sex or outside of marriage or whatever, you're misunderstanding the virtue. Because anyone that knows me knows I'm very impatient. Like, I'm a very impatient person. I not lose my temper, but I lose my patience very fast, and I can become very annoyed. And if I don't work on that, I'll never get better. But if you avoid the people that make you impatient, or you can never build. So people often say, don't pray for patience because God will send you a test to help you build it. I mean, the same. Again, obviously it depends on each person, but the same goes for chastity. And I mean, it's impossible obviously to avoid the opposite sex anyway.
And just a side reflection there, people say patience is a virtue.
Yeah.
I've never seen it on any of the list of virtues.
That's true.
It doesn't come up on any of the list of virtues.
No, but I suppose temperance, I mean, choosing not to lose control of yourself.
Well, that's true. But what you say there brings out another point, which was brought up in discussion of this issue with some philosopher friends of mine, is that another presupposition that runs through an awful lot of this, chastity talk at the popular level, is that it's presupposed that men and women are a threat to each other, that they pose a danger to each other, and the danger that they pose to each other that's what chastity has to address. So that danger they pose to each other has to be chastised in a way. So we have to regulate how men and women relate to each other because they are dangerous to each other. But even just from, a Catholic, background, not to mention the philosophical background, that's just not true.
Well, I mean, God created Eve as a helpmate to Adam, not as an enemy to Adam.
Yeah. Exactly. So, and even at the philosophical level, the level of the natural law, men and women are necessary, for the species. They complete each other, and you just see so many good, wholesome relationships, long-lasting marriages. You just see that men and women like each other too much to be a threat to each other. So this, underlying presupposition that men and women are a threat to each other, and the way to get over that is either to just make full use and abuse of each other, which is the hookup culture, or overly regulate how we relate to each other such that we can't even really relate to each other. It's just not good for healthy relationships. Whereas again, when you try to develop virtue, you try to become the best version of yourself. It's only when you do that you can enter into those long, deep, wholesome relationships that we see lasting, which are the sort of the virtuous relationships. So did you like that?
Yeah, indeed. And it's like exercising the muscle.
Yeah.
The muscle's already there. You just have to exercise it.
Yeah. So takeaway here, gentle listeners, is that men and women like each other too much. So we're also, gentle listeners, we're also, we're going to keep a record of how soon we can get Neve to lose her patience with me and give me a dirty look into the show. I think we were 5 minutes into this show and Neve gave me a dirty look. So
I lost my chance again today. Maybe tomorrow I'll build on the virtue.
Okay. So, we've got questions left
Yeah.
over. So we thought we would maybe take one of these questions that, you know, the wonderful greatness that is Ruth
Yes,
Um,
created for us.
gathered for us.
Indeed.
So let's have a. So I haven't seen these questions, gentle listeners. So Neve has just picked one at random.
Are people born evil?
I think we've literally just done an entire show, which the answer to that is no.
No.
Absolutely not. People are not born evil. People aren't evil. So, I mean, when we get into, you know, the metaphysics of good and evil, at the heart of all reality is the good. We talked about this in an early show, didn't we? The how
Yeah.
all of reality is a shadow of the good.
Yeah.
Evil is just a lack of goodness. It's not a real thing. People are not evil. Things that exist are not evil. So people are definitely not born evil. They can make bad choices and do bad things, okay? But in what they are, they always have a touch of goodness in them. So good always has the last say. Evil doesn't. So
That was a great answer.
what do you think?
I
You
think we
happy?
have time for one more.
You happy with that? Yeah, I've got
So
time. for
not only are people not born evil, people aren't evil.
Exactly. Yeah.
Can we ever truly know ourselves? Is our soul of infinite depth?
Can we ever truly know ourselves? Is our soul of infinite depth? Right, let's get into this, gentle listeners. So, the soul is the form of the body. I don't know how many times I have to repeat that, but people just don't get it, or people don't believe me when I say it. So, the soul
I
is...
just don't agree with you.
Well, we can get into that. The soul is the form of the body. What does that mean? Okay, things are made up of matter, okay? Material stuff which is formed in a certain way. Water is H2O, 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom. Hydrogen peroxide is H2O2, 2 hydrogen atoms, 2 oxygen atoms, right? They're both made of the same stuff, but that stuff is formed in a different way to give you water and hydrogen peroxide, right? Our stuff, the stuff made of living things, we're made of the same stuff as non-living things. Isn't that right? We have all the same elements in us.
Yeah.
We have hydrogen, oxygen, all the rest in us, right? So we're made of the same stuff as non-living things. So what makes us alive and means that non-living things aren't alive is that the way our stuff is put together is different from the way non-living stuff is put together. So we have a special form which organises our matter, which Aristotle called psyche or psyche, which is translates into Latin as anima, hence animate, animal, which in English is translated as soul. Every living thing has a soul, and that is not a separate thing from your body. I repeat, it is not a separate thing from your body. It's what organises your material components to be the kind of thing that you are. So we have what's called a rational soul, which means that our life is a rational form of life. So that's all the soul is. Now, that comes from Aristotle. Interesting thing, the Catholic Church at the Council of Vienne put that into a council that the soul is the form of the body, quoted directly Aristotle's words that the soul is the form of the body. So it's literally written into an ecumenical council that that's what Catholics believe. We do not believe with Plato that the soul is this separate thing from the body, that we are identified with our souls, or that I am my soul. We do not believe that. And Christianity has always rejected that Platonic notion, because if that were true, what about the resurrection of the body? Why should that matter? And this is a point that N.T. Wright makes in his book on the resurrection of the Son of God, that we Christians, so N.T. Wright isn't a Catholic, he's an Anglican, we Christians, we don't believe in life after death. We don't. We believe in life after a period after death. So we will die, and we come to life in the resurrection. Resurrection happened here, in this created reality. Christ was resurrected 2,000 years ago here in the whole. You can go to the Holy Lands, you know, where Christ walked and where the resurrected Christ walked. Please do. So it's here. It's this reality which is redeemed, and it's this reality that we will be reborn into eternal life. Now, the mode of being of that will be will be transformed. It'll be different from the way it is now, but it's this reality which is redeemed. So all that is to say that the soul is not this separate thing from the body. So back to the question, can we ever really know ourselves fully? Well, what am I? I am the individual subject, Gavin, that I am. which is this physical substance. Now, to know yourself as a self is to distinguish yourself from other selves. It's only when I distinguish myself from another self that I can never possess, but only enter into a relationship with, that I come to see myself fully as a self in relation to another. So there's an I and thou relationship. This is why human societies form. Selves come into, being in their relations to others. So if there is a self who is so transcendently, infinitely other than myself, then I can fully know myself when I come to fully know him, and that's God. So it's only when we come to enter into relationship with God that we come to fully see ourselves as the selves that we are. Is the soul, what was the question, of infinite value or infinite depth?
Yeah, infinite depth.
No, because the only thing in existence which is infinite is God.
Yeah.
We are finite creatures, so the soul only has, a finite, level to it. My soul is mine and it's not yours. Automatically there, it's finite. So the depth of the soul, I'm capable of knowing God, and when I come face to face with God, I will be capable of knowing him to the extent that I am able. But that's not an infinite extent. I can't know God fully as he is because I don't have an infinite intellect or an infinite will. So I can't know and love God as fully as he is, but I can to the degree that my limited human intellect and will can. So is it of infinite depth? No, but it's of significant depth because it can come to know God.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
So in knowing God, you can know yourself.
Yeah.
But if we can never fully know God, then can we never fully know ourselves?
So knowing God, we can come to know ourselves, right? Now, our knowledge of God will fill our intellects until it can't be filled anymore. So those feelings, in prayer when you feel your heart's about to burst, that's, so our intellects will be filled till it can't be filled anymore. But, okay, just because we can't know God fully doesn't mean that we cannot be fully fulfilled in our knowledge of God, and that will allow us to know ourselves.
Yeah.
We are reaching our time, gentle listeners.
I think that was a good way to finish.
Talk about knowing and loving God until your heart bursts.
Yeah.
Gentle listeners, thank you very much for tuning in. And it's been another, roller coaster.
Interesting. I think we probably have another show to do.
Yeah,
with
we
this.
probably do. We have all these questions still to do. Gentle listeners, thank you for tuning in. Have a great week.
Have a
Please
great evening.
Send us in messages and, hate mail and all the rest. And we'll see you again next week.
God bless you. Have a good evening.
God bless.